Okay, we now want to build a bit more complex screen, or we want to start building a complex screen. We'll start off slow and then make it more complex as we go. Now, everything that you see in the new Dev UI is some or other web component. Even this that I've shown you, like this raw data, this part here is a web component called raw data display web component or something, and it just displays raw data. This menu is a web component, this footer is a web component. So all of this is being made up by a bunch of web components. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail, but a web component is really made up of 4 specifications. All 4 of these specifications is being maintained by W3C, so the same group that maintains the HTML specification. So all it really is, it's custom elements, the first spec, and it is basically just a way to say that I want to create my own element. Like HTML gives us a tag called table, as an example, to display something in a table or a div. This allows you as a developer to write your own tags. Then it gives you shadow DOM, which allows us to encapsulate a part of this web, which means my web component won't influence any other part of the page. If I style my web component, it's just for my style, for my web component. And then modules and templates, basically just modules just allow us to reuse parts of the code. So that's why we can just create a file and call it our component. And templating is how we will actually generate the HTML markup. So I don't want to go into too much detail of this. You're welcome to go read up on web components. It is part of the standard now. It's supported by all the browsers. So there's no library that you need to include to get this. However, we are using lit. Lit is a library that just helps you structure your component nicely, and it helps with the templating, and we'll go through that. So let's start by adding a new page. We'll start off with just a page, just to show how it looks like. So now we'll say we want to build a page with the web component page builder. Icon is the same. Let's remove this because we'll get to this later. And then I just give it the component link, which is again just a file. So it's very similar to the Qt one, that you basically give it a link to the template, or in this case the component. So in our case we just give it this this name, and now we have a file called QWC joke web components. QWC is Quarkus web components. Web components needs to have at least 3-letter qualifier as the first part, and then dash, and then something. So the way in which we'll do it is we'll always call our components QWC something. Okay, so the structure of a web component is, it's just a class that we're going to export because we're going to use it somewhere else, and we're going to extend lit element. So this is where we use lit. If you don't use lit, you can extend any other element like HTML element or HTML table or whatever other existing element exists within HTML. But lit element is then something that gives us a way to structure it nicely, like I said. And what we have when we use lit is we have a static variable called styles, where we can then use CSS, which we import from lit. And now in here I just write plain CSS. So I can do dot whatever, and this is CSS. We'll add some styling to our component later. I also have properties, and these properties there's different ways to use these properties. They can be representing an attribute on the component. So let's say we write some component and somebody uses it, they can pass in values in an attribute and we'll pick it up in properties. For us, we mostly use it because we change data from the backend's point of view, and that changes the page. And then the last thing that lit gives us is this method called, well, not the last thing, the thing that we're going to use now is called render. It's a render method where we basically just going to return the template. And we'll build the template with this HTML, which also comes from lit, and in here I can write any HTML. So let's just write something like this. We'll say, let's do span hello world, and close the span. And if I want, I can actually style it. So we can say span, and let's just to make it visible, back, around, red. So this should be enough to get us going. Let's see how this looks like. Okay, so I've rebuilt it and restored the application. I forgot to mention this part here, that you still have to define your new element once you're done. This has got nothing to do with lit, this is plain web components. And what we do in Dev UI is that your name here, so your QWC dash name, it's usually QWC dash name of your extension and dash page name, will be the same name here, or has to be the same name here. And if you take this and you take out the dashes and you make it camel case, will be your component name. So we kind of follow that convention. Right, so I've built this. If we go back to the screen, you'll now see that I now have a new page called Web Components, which is what I called it here. Well, I actually didn't give it a name, so it will detect the name of here. It will take away these two and just say, oh, you want to call it Web Components. And if I click on it, I now render my web component, which is just hello world in red. Right. So this is not really very interesting. So let's get back to our component and see what else we can do. So the first thing that we want to show is how do we show our data. So I can import my jokes from, and then jokes dash data, and again this follows some convention. The jokes dash data comes from your component name or your extension name dash data, and then this jokes here is obviously this jokes here. Right, so now I have jokes to display. So in my template I can just display it. What we probably want to do is we want to create a property and call it jokes. So if I start with an underscore, it indicates that this is a private property, and we want to give it state true. Now what this means is the lit will follow the property, and if the property changes, the state is changed and it will update the template. You can also make the state false, which means that won't occur. But in our case, we want to say if it changes this, because later we'll add to that jokes in runtime. So we can start off by just we can start off by adding a constructor. Let me just find an example here, because what we need to do is we need to set this dot jokes to the jokes that we've imported, and then I should be able to use it here. So I should be able to say this dot jokes, and for now we can just do length to see how many jokes we have. Hello world, we have so many let's see what this does. Okay, so I've rebuilt it. Let's see how that looks like. And there you have it. We have 10 jokes. So you can see the build time data is available for you to use. It's not very interesting, so let's actually change this to be a bit more interesting. Okay, so let's, rather than displaying just how many jokes we have, let's display all the jokes. Right, so I'm gonna remove the span, and then rather than length, we'll do map, and right, so we'll map all these jokes. What we get out of the map is the actual item, so a joke, and if you want you can also get the index. We won't use the index. And then what we will do with it is we'll create some HTML. So we can maybe say that we want to, in fact let's actually list it, so we'll do unordered list item there and close it there. And then here we can just, let's just do this, that's nice and easy. So here we'll do a list item, and it will be the joke dot. Right. Now to see what is in the joke, you can just look at the Java class, and you can see all the properties that's available here. We'll just use this one here, full joke. So full joke, and that should do it. Let's see what this does. Okay, there was a bug in the previous piece of code. This was wrong, and I've also removed any styling now because we're not using it anymore. And then I've rebuilt and restarted. So let's see if I now go to web components and we reload. Okay, you see all the jokes. There was another bug. I missed that I need to insert this HTML into an HTML tag. But that's fairly simple template language. That's quite powerful. This is all coming from lit. It's well documented, and you can read up on it and understand everything that can be done. We'll continue to show how we can now do runtime, get runtime data, because up until now we've just displayed a bunch of build time data.